Um, you have your grades now, if you are in the face-to-face class. For the online students, I graded and I put on D2L everybody who took it on paper. I haven't gone through people who submitted electronically. I apologize to the unseen faces. I will do it by tomorrow. It's a midterm, so it's a good time for reflection. Standard rule, if you keep doing what you're doing, chances are you're going to keep getting the same results, right? So, if you got 110, keep doing what you're doing. If you got 100, keep doing what you're doing, right? If you like your results, keep doing what you're doing. If you don't like your results, right, then you need to think. The vast majority of you are either did really well and have 100 and there's nothing to think about, and keep doing whatever you were doing, right? Whatever you're doing works perfectly, so keep doing it. Or there is a lot of people who are kind of on the edge. If you got a 70 or an 80 or a 60 many, right? Chances are that you got the basics, right? Maybe messed up here or there, but got the basics and didn't get recursion, right? That tends to be, and then chances are you are getting midterm grades from other classes, right? And so you need to make a decision, and only you can make the decision, right? There is basically three possibilities. One is, I like what I'm doing, I'll keep doing it, right? That's perfectly okay. Another decision is, I don't like what I'm doing, right? So I need to change something, right? It may be put more time into this class. It may be study differently, right? Have you been using the tutoring center? Do you have a study group? Right? What can you do to learn better, right? Unfortunately, maybe you get to decide that you cannot do those things, right? And it may be Wednesday, I think, October the 4th, is the last day for withdrawing without a grade, not withdrawing, dropping without grade penalty, right? It is horrible. It is way less horrible than failing a class, right? And it may be that that's not this class, right? If you're getting a 70 on this class, I would say don't drop it, right? If you're getting a 70 on the test or something like that, I wouldn't say, right? Just think about what can you do to improve, right? If you got a 20 on the test, then, right? That's when you have to think about, well, what should I do, right? And it may be that you need to drop this class. It may be that you need to drop some other class in which you got, right? Just make sure that you can do whatever you want to do, right? I'm not talking to anybody. I don't even remember your grades. It's been horrible this week, so I don't even remember who did what. But just if you didn't get the results you were expecting, right? If you didn't get the results you want, then something ought to change, right? And if you want to learn, I want to teach, but you may need to change something what you're doing. Who are you? Ah, there you are. Thank you. Let me quickly go over the test-ish. And I'm cheating, and I combined both of the tests. I think. No, I didn't. Okay, I have two versions of tests. Sometimes I put the other version stuff here. But number one was for you guys, write Java code to create a variable of type string called name and initialize it to your name. Something like string name equals Orlando, or string name and then name equals Orlando, right? Quotation marks are very important. They'll denote a string constant, right? If not, then you're assigning to another variable or something like that, right? There were a few people who did the horrible stuff and started defining functions, right? Functions are used to do calculations, right? They encapsulate the calculation. Variables store values. They're completely different, right? You should know which one is which and how to define each of those. Any questions on this stuff? This was kind of a easy points, right? Number two, given the following code fragment, what would be the value of ant at the end? We get int a equals 10, b equals a plus 1, plus a, b times equals 2, right? Here on this line, line 3, a bunch of people got confused, right? What's the value of b before that line? 11, right? We don't care that the value of a changed, right? The value of b didn't change. So we use b. A lot of people miscalculated, right? And then said, oh, let me go calculate a plus 1. A is 11 plus 1 is 12. So they did b equals 12, and so b times 2 equals 24, right? That's a lot more visible on the other section because it has more steps. Assignment, right? Looks like algebra, but it's not. It's just put this value into this box, right? This one was relatively easy points. Many of you messed up here or there. I tried to guess if you write what you did, and I think there was 1 or 2 people who did the steps right, but messed up the math somewhere, and so I'll take a point off or something. But number 3, write a Java function called add that takes 2 integers and returns an integer. The result of adding is 2 parameters. Super easy, right? Int add, int a and b, return a plus b. That's it. Some people actually want to do horrible stuff like reading from the keyboard or something like that. This one again was super easy. Just add up 2 parameters, return the value, that's it. And for the Sunday people, I did the same thing, but with times and multiplication. Oops, and I put the wrong answer, but that's okay. I'll correct it. Number 5, and for you guys was slightly different wording, but it's the basic idea, right? Using a case statement, write a Java function called seasons that takes an int and returns a string, converts numbers from 0 to 3 into seasons of the year. 0 is 1, 0 is spring, 1 summer, 2 fall, 3 winter, right? For this particular thing with that name of the function, right? It's a function called season, returns a string, takes an int, and you have to do a switch statement and then cases, right? You could have done it with an intermediate variable, right? And assigning to the variable and then returning the value at the end. This is kind of reasonably straightforward. Yes, no questions on this stuff? And then recursion, and we can go through it again. Number 6 is what YouTube. Number 7 is the same, but on Sunday. And then number 8, I think, was basically the same for both sections. So using recursion, write a function called print by step that takes 2 parameters, a print string and an int, say step. The function prints to the print stream all numbers from 0 to 100 incremented by step. So for example, print by step system out 20 would print 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, right? So how can we do this? I will get it from here. Yeah, no, I was in the previous class and somebody, I'm still trying to remember. If you start, right, IDEs have macros. Yeah. And so PSVM, for public static void main, will actually autocomplete to that thing. Okay. So if you just start typing PSVM and then choose it, or, right? I just press enter. Okay. Get it. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's cool, because I do that every class, right? So maybe I'll try to memorize that macro. I don't memorize macros on the Mac because I use Linux and my fingers get confused. I haven't really memorized any of these things on the Mac. But, okay. So what do we do? Ah, you horrible piece of manure. Static. What does this function return? Nothing. How do we write nothing? What's the type of nothing? Void. Right? Can I do it just with these two things?
I thought the answer was no to that. I thought you had
No. So I need to create one, right? That's going to take.
Oh,
yeah.
I thought maybe I was wrong about that.
I need to keep track of the current one, right? So this becomes relatively simple, right? If current less than or equal to 100, out.print ln current and then this one just become print by step out.
Oh,
Does this make sense?
The way
How close I was to that, I couldn't figure out how to make it start at 0, and so
I start from 0.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I forgot this. You're right. You need this, right, to pass 0 as the current.
for some reason my brain just shut down and I could not make 0
By the way, for your assignment, right, you made one that took 3 parameters, right? You had mean, right, low, high, and
Similar.
right, and so there was somebody who basically did that one and just called it. Like I memorized that stuff. So. Does this make sense?
The way you do it, you never modify step. You just modify current.
Yes.
The way I did it was I started with a count, and I modified step, and I printed 0, and then I multiplied.
Yeah, you did it.
Step.
It works, but it's complicated, right? So
Yeah,
you were, instead of having current, you had a count,
Yeah.
and so you would check. And so this was actually an interesting way of doing it.
Yeah, I was like, there's probably a simpler way to do this, but I didn't think of that.
Which was this. Let me do it and call it here count. Ah! And so you multiplied, right? So here you would do things like count times step less than 100, and so you would do
I was up to my step times count, and then you add 1 to count.
yeah. It works, right? It's just a lot easier to keep it in terms of step.
So basically,
You need some sort of accumulator, right? And that's your third parameter. More a counter than an accumulator, but yeah. Does this make sense?
Yeah, but when you do it on paper, you don't see that wiggly line. It makes.
You just passed. Never mind. I think you did better on the other test than on this one. So, for the Sunday people, I did it like this. You take low and high, and you increment by 5. So what does it look like? I'm going to call it step 2, right? Oh, I can't. Sunday. Do I need a counter? I need a volunteer though. That I do need. Who's gonna go do it?
So this wasn't a program we did on the test.
Sorry?
This wasn't a program we did on the test, is it?
No, this is for the other guys. This is the equivalent program for the Sunday guys. Who's gonna volunteer?
I get it.
Who looks like a volunteer?
Oh, we did this actually.
Go volunteer there. You're a volunteer. You have been volunteered. You have been nominated as a volunteer. Okay, we got an actual volunteer. Cool.
What does it do? Let's see. Stream and 2 minutes. They're already there. All numbers from low to high. Okay, that's it. All right.
Do we need an extra
let's
counter in this case?
see.
We can always define what with an extra counter, but do we need it? What can we do?
Incrementing by 5.
We use low as a counter.
If low is less than high.
Exactly. So reuse low as a counter and go changing low.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because you're just incrementing by 5, right? So, yeah, okay. Wait, isn't don't you print inclusively here?
So less than or equal.
Although you don't need an else, you just
What else do? We print that one and then
you go back to the beginning. So
you have to pass out at the beginning.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. At the first parameter of that function call has to be out.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that.
Yep.
All right, and I guess that's all you need. Have an extra bracket.
We need that extra bracket.
Well,
The
the
other extra
brackets
that's
are
okay.
ugly, but
No, you need
Yeah,
to
you need
indent
one.
one level, but that's okay.
You need one right there.
okay.
Cool. Thank you. Does this make sense? We are going to be doing more complicated stuff, but you should be able to produce this kind of stuff, right? Kind of from scratch. And then, actually, I was surprised. I think many of you actually memorized more than thought. So this one got you by surprise because it was different, right? It's like, oh, I knew it with apples and oranges, not just with apples. So kind of got frozen. The other one. Let's go do it in a bunch of different ways and things, right? So string contains, does the string contains the character, right? It returns a Boolean. One way is assume that you have these functions, right? Car firsts. I'll return the first character in the string, right? And you don't need to, right? You didn't need to define this. You could assume they existed, right? But if those two functions exist, right, how can we define this? What's our base case? What's the simplest possible string? the empty string, right? If the string is the empty string, does it contain the character? Does it contain
No.
that
no,
character? No.
Just return.
Now I know that it's not the empty string, right? But I can do if the first equals what? If the first character equals that character, what do we return? Does the string contain the character?
Yes.
Yes, so return true. Now what can we do for our recursive step, right? Use rest and the same character, right? Eventually rest, right, takes out all the characters. Eventually we either find it at the beginning of the string or we don't, right? And we reach the empty string. Does this make sense? Maybe it will even work. So we should get true and false, right? Yay.
So for the empty string, the s dot equals, so the char at 0 is equal to.
There is no char at 0. The whole string equals the empty string. So there is no character at 0.
So s dot, say you input that empty string into that function.
It would just come
So
here.
Goes to s dot equals calls s dot char at 0.
No, it doesn't call. Is s equal to the empty string? Yes, return false.
Okay,
That's it.
all right. So char at 0 would not work.
Char
You can't do char at 0
to an empty string? No, it would crash. That's what first does, right?
All right, so I have to do s dot equals the empty string.
That has to be your first case, because if
Okay.
not, right, you could use and s dot length equals 0,
Or that. Okay.
which is another way of saying the same thing. You can actually also say s dot is empty.
It's empty.
Maybe this one is prettier. You could almost do this. What's the possible problem there? That sometimes it will not work, right? Because there may be a different instance of a string that has no characters. Does this make sense? There is another way that we can do it using length and char at, right? That would have us do something like this, right? We're going to have the index. Do we start at 0 and go up till the end, or do we start at the end and go back down to 0?
Start from 0, go to
Okay, so if index less than or equal to the length of s, right? We know that we are done, so we're going to return false, right?
What sort of variable?
What do you mean?
Index.
Okay.
If the index is greater than the length, right? Yeah. If you do it this way, you also need to define a wrapper function that calls this one with a 0 as the index, right? You could also do it counting down from length down till you get 0, right? And depending on how you do those things, you may end up with slightly different conditions. Off by 1, basically. Any questions about this stuff? Recursion, programming, the meaning of life? By now, I do expect that you should, right, without thinking, be able to do these first things, right? This one should be automatic, right? This one should be, well, I need to think, but it's straightforward, right? This kind of stuff should be duh, right? Super automatic. This kind of stuff should be reasonably automatic, right? Either with this or with kind of if statements and a bunch of conditions, right? They should be reasonably automatic. You may, depending on which ones you end up using more or less, not remember the syntax, or right? Mess up the syntax a little bit somewhere. I'll still take points off, but that's understandable. Recursion should be relatively easy. Maybe not automatic. You still need to turn your brain on, right? It's not like these things, but by now you should get it, right? You should be able to do these kinds of simple things easily. If you can't, what do? Do more, right? Until it sticks. It is different to write code in a piece of paper than the computer. It feels different, right? It is different to write a code without aids, right? Whereas the IDE will fill up stuff, right? So make sure that you get practice, right? That you get enough practice that stuff becomes not a big deal. Again, if you miss a tiny unimportant syntax thing, I'll probably not even notice, right? If you don't put a semicolon somewhere, I won't notice. If you miss important syntax, then I'll probably notice, right? Like if you don't put a colon here, I'll probably notice, right? So, you know where you stand. Yep. It's all cool. Any questions about any of this stuff? Given that we are going to start doing loops, do you still need to know recursion? Yes, because you're going to be guaranteed that there'll be one on the final, and we'll actually be using recursion, right, in a bunch of other sections, right? So make sure that you get it.
When will we know when the final is going to be?
I have no clue whatsoever. Kennesaw does.
Oh, so it's just our declared date for this class this time period?
Sorry?
Is it just our declared time for this time period?
Yes,
Okay.
for y'all.
Okay, I don't know.
I will probably come up with a special inconvenient time for the online people. just because some people actually chose, right, to do it online because they have another class at this time or something like that. This time, if you're envying them, it was Sunday at 9:30 a.m. So it's usually something that's inconvenient enough that nobody has anything scheduled at that time. It's kind of an extra option. I have no clue. I'll find out.
I can look too. I just thought it was going to be.
Cool.
I thought you were going to pick a day along towards the end. It was going to be our scheduled time.
Unless we usually are okay, if you guys prefer, we could use the last day of classes as the final exam. We should finish with a week or two for review and stuff. So, but it's that. Let's talk about it next class, and if everybody agrees, we can do it on the last day of classes instead of on the official scheduled time.
I just want to request it off work, so I need to know.
Oh. Cool. So we're all done. You know this stuff. Cool. You're either happy with your grade or figuring out what you're going to do to change it.
The Luke's assignment was due on Sunday.
Officially.
I was curious about that because it says it's September 31st.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
It said
funny.
it's
Yeah.
still due October, so I was
Yes. It was due on Sunday, not that I have ever enforced deadlines. And especially when I am not grading and giving you feedback. This week has been horrible, so I haven't actually graded anything for like 3 or 4, like a week probably.
you turned blind after you turned it in.
Sorry?
You turned blind after you turned it in.
Absolutely. I won't even notice. I won't Wednesday is by Wednesday I start noticing because I try to actually grade everybody by Wednesday. But I won't. But let's go over loops again, right? And my horrible notes are horrible and I never fixed them. We have 3 things, and we have a loop condition, a body of a loop, and we normally have 1 or more loop variables that we change within the loop so that we change the condition, right? Do while starts with do, keeps going while some condition is true. It executes at least once, which may or may not be what you want, right? While loop has while. Again, on all of this, like with the if, the parentheses are part of the syntax. You need parentheses. On the do while loop, the semicolon is part of the syntax. It is not on a while loop. The while loop checks first, so you may or may not execute, right? We actually have a for loop, which is kind of the one that most people use a lot. For a while loop, you end up initializing your variables, then doing stuff on inside. You do stuff with your variables, and then you change them so that the condition changes. And so the for loop just formalizes that. So you do for, you write your initialization, then a semicolon, your condition, semicolon, and your increment, the changing of the variables, right? And inside, you put the body of the loop. The braces are not necessarily there, but you probably want to put them there for all of these guys, right? So, you actually have problems. Woohoo! How can we do print by step with a for loop? what can we do? If you think about it here, we are keeping this current, right? That's our counter. So we can just keep that, right? Int current equals 0, less than or equal than 100. Not plus plus, right? Current plus equals step. That's my increment, right? And that's
So,
it.
what's the difference current plus plus and wait, oh, the step is
Yes.
sometimes stepped by.
We are going by 5s or by 10s or by
That's all I could think of on that test. And wanted to do that.
It is basically this stuff.
Yeah, it just I couldn't think of how to do the proper, and I just wanted to do the for loop.
How about string contains? We can actually do it basically this one, right? With a while loop. While s is not empty, right? If first s
Was s equal to or is equal to the next
and
string?
sorry,
Was s equal to reset string? Go to
s equals to rest of s. So skip the first character and go to
the next
a
one.
string that doesn't have the first character, has all the other ones. So if you have like ABC, it will make it BC. Right, and if we finish the loop and reach the empty string, then we know that it wasn't there, so we return false. Does this make sense? Some sense. Let me not change this one into a for loop, but let's do this one with a for loop, right? So we go through every character. If we find it, return true. If we go through the whole string and we didn't find it, return false. Hopefully it's not one of the assignments. I don't think it is. Does this make sense? Any questions about loops? Shall we do slightly more interesting loops? Did we do? Oh, we did. Let's do. Let's print So we can do multiplication. Something like this, right? How can we do this? Google it and cut and paste it. How can we do this with a program?
Like, let's say 4 and I equals 1 to the number print.
Let me call it. Let's call them row and column so we don't get right. We could call them I and J. That's the standard thing. But int row equals 1. Row less than or equal to n. And now we need to go right. Then inside I would print no.
T is that for table?
Tab. Let's see what it looks like and then we can go. We probably want yeah. Throat, right? And we still need our header, but does this make sense? We need something on top that says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Basically, this same kind of line on top, right? We could, but we can't do it here. We have to do it here, right? Actually, let's do it the right way. Oh, we can do it the other way around. Ha, 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 ha. 4 int I equals 0. Oops. I am a horrible person. That would probably allow me to do this. Get it prettier. Ooh. What happened? Print a line. Not sure this dialog ever. Yay! What is cool about this? We have what? We have a nested loop, a loop inside a loop, right? So we do it quadratic-ish number of times, right? Does this make sense? Is this cool or what? What other cool examples can we do with loops? Since we have about 10-15 minutes, actually, yeah. You can go to like Coding Bat and see if they have cooler examples, right? Medium string problems. One loop, double car, what's this? Given a string, return string where for every car in the original there are now 2 cars. What can we do?
So look at every character in order, and then to edit the string so that the next character is that character.
How do we do our loops and strings? str dot what's our
Lengths.
length, right? So we are going to have our accumulator string and do this.
Okay. You don't modify the actual string. You create a new string and
Yeah.
keep adding. Yeah.
May even work. Yay! We can solve simple problems. For loops should become kind of second nature, right? Next. How could we do this?
Start from character 0 until the end.
Well,
I was just, and then you look at character 0 and character 1, and
Yeah.
you look at character 1, character 2, and 2 and 3.
but that is horrible,
And
which is okay. How can we make a function that says whether it says hi at that index?
if the character at the index is h, and the character at the
Yep.
index plus 1 is I, you have to watch out for, well, not this one.
I don't. The other guy, whoever calls me, is their problem. Index, right? right? So now, what's my for loop? Int I equals 0, I less than what? The what? str what? Str is a string. Can I compare an int with a string? Length. And then that's not going to work, but that's okay. No, and I need a counter, right? So I need int count equals 0. If
We're not counting the first time. We're not adding. So we just have a boolean increasing by 1.
if it's a boolean, I can't increase by 1.
You can increase the count by 1 every time you get it true.
Yes. Oh, I'm an idiot. This should be boolean.
We didn't notice.
Sorry?
We didn't notice.
And then, would this work? Seems reasonable. Do you see the problem?
How about H and I is no different location.
Oh,
Same
that's,
string, I don't
you
mind.
don't have to count those.
So
H with the I right next to it, right? So it's whether it says hi.
Sure.
We are off by 1. Let's run it and see what happens. Nothing works. Oh. Oh, that. Nothing works. What's my problem? What happens when I try with the last character in the string? Try to see whether that character is H, and that's okay, but then I try to see where the next one is I, and that breaks, right? So I need to do -1 here. It still doesn't work. But that's not the.
Yeah, you only need to look up until start at length -1.
Yeah, I think I'm always returning 0. No, that would be how you call me, right? When you call it 0, when we call car at the string and 0, we check.
You
Oh.
need to insert the length minus.
I was doing index for both. So index and index +1.
oh, okay. It's different.
I was looking at the same character and requiring it to be an H and also to be an I, which is not a good idea. Yay! Any questions about loops? No? Then I'll return you 10 minutes of your life. I'll see you guys on Wednesday.